Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. Time travel and time related stories and powers aren't really like my favorite thing in the world to explain or even like talk about in general. But if we're gonna talk about Riot Watches, we have no choice but to do that. So if your head hurts just as mine does in the process of making this, then I'm here with you, pimp. By the way, like the video so I know you want more Kamen Rider Explain goodness, and please check out my second channel, Flying Shadow. It's hilarious. I do hilarious stuff there. Shilling's done. Video starts now. Ridewatches are the stopwatch-like devices in Geo that hold the previous Kamen Rider's powers, memories, and history within them. By the way, there are 4 types of watches that exist in this series, and each one has a different method of being created. There are the standard types, aka the legend riders, the personal types, and the Mirai types, and we'll talk about all 3 of those in that order. The 4th type, another watches, will be explained alongside the another riders, so I won't cover them here. I do want to mention that some personal Riot watches are unique enough to stand alone, and for the sake of this video, I will refer to them as the personal special types. To activate one, a user turns the device's bezel clockwise, then presses the ride-on starter on top. Some Riot watches don't have turning bezels, but are dependent on the ride-on starter to kick off its power. Mirai watches work similarly, but because they don't have a bezel, they only need to be activated by pressing the Mirai on starter. And other watches like the Gates Revive or Geo Trinity Ride Watch have special features that come from their special creations. Ride watches exist from the fact that a rider's whole history and powers were stolen from them and put into this device, meaning that as long as a ride watch is active and in use, the rider corresponding to it will have no memories of anything in their history, as well as the inability to transform into any of their rider forms. This means that time is unfortunately altered for this to happen. This history also includes their villains as well, though this rule changes from rider to rider, as some bad guys have origins independent to their riders. If a rider holds and activates their specific Ride Watch, they will regain their powers, abilities, and as well as their memories, and they can even choose to return their powers back into the Ride Watch if they're done. Standard Ride Watches are just the main rider watches mainly collected in the series, but this includes all of the other watches in there as well. For example, Build and Cross are considered standard types, but the main ride watch holds the most power over time, if that made sense. There are 3 methods to creating a standard ride watch, with each method being seen in the series. The first method requires that a person has met both another rider and the veteran rider the monster is based on. That rider would give them their powers in the ride watch form so that they could go into the past and use that power to defeat the another rider. After defeating the other rider in the past, the veteran rider receives a blank ride watch, which becomes the usable ride watch in the future. This method starts a time paradox, as in order to defeat another rider permanently, the veteran rider loses their memories of getting the blank ride watch until they are approached in the present time. The second method comes by way of finding another rider who has hidden rider powers within them. This usually requires you to mollywomp the another rider until the powers are ejected out of their body in the form of a ride watch. And the third method comes by way of transferring power, as either a veteran rider's transformation device becomes a ride watch, or they willingly transfer their power into a blank ride watch on the spot. Time Jackers have shown the ability to forcefully take the powers if they want, while Tsukasa has shown the ability to turn his ride watch back into a driver, revealing that he can choose the quantity of power to transfer. Now this raises the question, do all riders have the ability to do that, or is just Tsukasa can do that because he's the man? Let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below. Now, because these devices involve time, therefore time travel, if you don't have a time machine to travel to the past, you cannot create one without access to the origin of the watch's power. A rarer case to this would be finding a rider's power that originates in an alternate continuity or timeline. This whole thing generally blankets the riders of Kamen Rider Ryuki, as their powers come from the mirror world, and until that place is restored, they don't have access to their powers. However, if one can siphon riders' powers from another world or timeline, they can bypass these rules, as shown with the creation of Dark Ryuga. Up next is the personal Riot watches, which are exclusively used by the riders of Geo and are created in special ways. The best example is Sogo's base form watch, which was formed when he decided to change his fate. Speaking of forms, if one wants to transform with a Riot watch, you need a driver to do so. The Jiku or Ziku driver is an optional dual device driver that is used in conjunction with a Riot watch after the watch has been activated. Personal Riot watches go on the right slot of the device, while others are placed on the left side of the device. Regardless of which is on, after placement, the driver is spun in a full 360 degrees on the waist, kickstarting the transformation. If a standard Ride watch is on the left side, it will allow access to the rider armor of that watch, which in use allows a user to wield the powers of said ride. If a personal special type is on the left side, it will invoke a form change of that Geo Rider. This obviously gives them a power boost, but also allows them to access new themed abilities and weapons as well. A good example, and a personal favorite of you boys, is the Geo Ride Watch 2. Which gave Sogo not only enhanced stats, but also gave him a future sight to predict enemy movements, a new weapon called the Saikyo Grade, and the ability to defeat another riders without using their matching Legend Rider Watch to do so. Decayed Ride Watch is interesting, seeing that when in use, the device itself has a placement for Ride Watches as well. When in use, a user gains access to a special rider armor called Decayed Armor, which is based on the power-up version of the Ride Watch in question. For example, Build Superform would be considered Rabbit Tank Sparkling, so using Build Ride Watch with the Decayed Watch would give you a hybrid version of that. Only 6 have been seen in the entirety of the franchise, but from what we've seen, we can make a few educated guesses on what it can and can't do. We can infer that Riot Watches only bring out the super modes of riders, never going beyond that, possibly because of the escalation of forms post-Decayed. Again, we look at the Decayed Armor build, which goes to Rabbit Tank Sparkling, but doesn't assume forms above it like Hazard, for example. If you have any thoughts on this subject on the Decayed Ride Watch's do's or don'ts, let's have that discussion in the comment section. Now we move on to the third and final Ride Watch, the Ridewatches. Now, during the midpoint of Geo, we had no point what the future of Rider would hold. With that, and the knowledge that Ride Watches normally absorb energy from the past, it was deemed impossible to gain a Ride Watch with the powers of a Kamen Rider from the future, because you can't make something out of something that doesn't exist. However, 4 Ride Watches were made from the future timeline, and as a result were not created in the traditional way normal Ride Watches are. For our sake, we can blame Whitewash and his future note, which allowed for the manipulation of future events by adding it into the book. Because of these time-space shenanigans, we are given future-based Ride Watches which hold a great deal of power. Only the Beyond Driver has access to the future rider armors they provide, while 3/4 of their combined energy produced a Ride Watch from an alternate timeline, adding more time-space BS to an already complicated explained video. So we'll just leave it here. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to give me a like, subscribe to the channel for more Kamen Rider Explained goodness in the comment section below. Let me know what your favorite Ride Watches are, types, designs, riders with them. If you never saw your favorite rider's Ride Watch, what is it? I mean, you guys know me, Evolt, 01, Oja. Yeah, I mean, I got my 3 favorites. I'm in there. This one was a little tricky to do, so I apologize in advance for that. The Another Riders one is just as tricky because there's so many loops in it, but I should be able to crank that one out. I just love shows that are like this because they're so confusing, so it means I have to rewrite scripts 4 times and make sure that the future version of me is prepared for this, but I don't have time for loopholes like this. I'm Lambo Calrissian reminding you guys to keep calm and Toku on.